No, can you hear us? Okay.
Hi.
Can you hear us okay?
It's a little quiet,
Okay.
but I can mostly hear you.
Do you? Okay, we're doing a little behind the scenes sound engineering
Sure.
because we can hear you nice and clear.
Yeah, he's
Cool.
tapping buttons right now.
And they get mad when I move the microphone closer to my face.
I just turned up on my end a little bit, and it was a bit better. So I think we should be good.
Okay. I'm also very good at shouting. If that's helpful.
Perfect.
Well, certainly to start, if that's okay, we would love it if you could introduce yourself a little bit and share more about your journey into comics.
Yeah. Hi. My name's Emmett Hill. I am the author of Let Me Out, my debut graphic novel, alongside illustrator and co-creator George Williams. I'm also the author of From the Belly, which is my debut prose novel. Both are horror. And yeah, I got into writing comics probably during college. I started writing Let Me Out as a part of NaNoWriMo back when that was a non-problematic thing to do. And yeah, I ended up working together with George, and we collaborated via Twitter at first, and we met online. George is, again, a very talented illustrator and 50% of this project. And he is in the north of England, actually. So we've never met in person and only did that collaboration, over the internet. And Let Me Out grew from there.
How difficult was that? Sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, just dealing with that time difference and never meeting in person, how was that process of getting your ideas and script into their, I guess, imagery?
Yeah, I think you're still a little quiet on your end, but I think I got most of the question. So yeah, it was mostly we worked kind of asynchronously. So this was right around like 2018, 2017. So Zoom wasn't as big of a thing back then. So we mostly worked through Discord and through messages, and we passed sort of back and forth script ideas, character ideas, and all that good stuff. I'd already had a good chunk of the script written, but it wasn't complete. And so I sort of would discuss like pitch ideas and everything that has to do with the creation of that comic. And we just passed it back and forth like notes in class kind of thing. And that really worked. We were able to sort of give each other feedback and talk through it in that way. And I think the key was we were not under a strong deadline at that time. We had not decided to kickstart it yet. And also it was just like a more, it was a side project at the time. And so we kind of, we didn't have a hard and fast, like this project has to be finished by this time deadline at the moment. So that really helped.
Take that approach again, or would you prefer a different method next time?
Honestly, I think that any method, in terms of collaboration, I think there are so many amazing people online right now who are doing incredible work across the world, and so I would have absolutely no problem doing that similar method again. I think when it comes to kickstarting versus not kickstarting, I think that's a whole different ballgame. But collaboration online is something that I've done my entire career in my other life. I'm a video game developer at Perfect Garbage Studios, which is also a remote work situation as well. So I'm very used to that, very accustomed to that. I think it's a great way to make creative work if you have the capacity for it.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, never. You're good. Yeah. Emmett, can you share a little bit more about what the inspiration and evolution behind Let Me Out was?
Yeah, so Let Me Out was initially created in response to stuff like Stranger Things, actually. A show that's very baked and rooted in nostalgia for a very particular era, or a series of eras in American history. And it always frustrated me personally whenever those eras and those sort of more vintage-inspired historical pieces of media that were focused on genre and were focused on doing fun things with genre kind of implicitly excluded queer people, people of color, folks with different levels of ability. I think that kind of thing really irks me as a creator, and again, as an Arab American and as somebody who is queer. And so working through all of those frustrations led me to look a lot at the actual history of that period in American culture and in American politics, which often included a lot of weird stuff from American history that feels very conspiratorial, but isn't really, like MK Ultra and like a lot of specific government involvement in like local culture, specifically queer culture and cultures of people of color. And so those things all kind of meshed together in my mind when thinking about the concept of Let Me Out. Also, like the Satanic Panic generally was a huge, I find that period incredibly interesting from a historical perspective and unfortunately very relevant in today's America. And so pursuing that theme and finding out what kind of characters would be interesting to work within that theme was kind of where that the kernel of that idea came from for me.
Dovetailing off of what you guys were just talking about, I was curious about, I hope you can hear me, sorry.
Yeah.
But I was going to ask what attracted you to Satanic Panic, and specifically the decade of the 70s, if there's anything, if it was just because that's the decade that the Satanic Panic was like more prevalent, if it was because you just thought it was like an interesting time period, if there's something else too that you wanted to, that attracted you to the idea of focusing on queer people during that time period. I was just curious because, I feel like a double story can be told in any time period, but the fact that you chose this one is interesting.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying so. I personally think that like I said, I'm interested in the Satanic Panic as a time in American culture and in American history. And the late 70s, early 80s, it's set in 1979. So I think that was an interesting sort of period of time in terms of transition of culture. Like the Satanic Panic was going on, but also at the same time, there was a variety of sort of queer liberatory movements going on at the same time. It was a really interesting and cool time period for punk music and alternative culture in general. I obviously don't necessarily have access to that experience. I'm turning 30, so I wasn't conscious at that time. But I do think that it's just a really interesting transitional period in subculture, in the culture of music and everything else, as well as within politics as well. So a few different things were interesting to me about that time period. Yeah.
I mean, the 70s gave us Queen, so no one's complaining about that.
Yeah. Were there any specific events, like I know you said Satanic Panic and punk culture, but were there any like specific events that inspired anything in this book, or?
Mm-hmm. I think specifically, I was looking at the resurgence of Satanic Panic in our current modern day culture. I think that unfortunately, for anybody who's queer or trans, we are living through another time period of like really hardcore witch hunts and, for lack of a better word, like culture war around that kind of stuff. And so I was really thinking about it more so about connecting that historical time period to our present and making sort of drawing those lines between that historical period and now. So a lot of the characters are framed in that time period, but I didn't want it to seem too grounded exclusively in history and not accessible to people like me who'd be reading the comic today, if that makes sense.
You said, or at least part of this said, that you are in the Upper Boston area. What made you want to set this in New Jersey?
I'm a huge enjoyer of how liminal New Jersey can be. I have some very good friends who live there. I visited there quite a few times. I lived in New York for a good amount of time, and I was living there when I wrote the story as well. And so I think New Jersey, in a lot of ways, is very liminal and also has some really interesting pockets of very archetypically Americana suburban culture that I think fit the sort of fictitious town of Columbiana like pretty well. So yeah, kind of a confluence of those things.
Where in New Jersey were you? I'm genuinely curious.
I was
My
in-
sister's from New Jersey,
I was in New York. So I was,
where in New York?
what was it?
Where in New York? Sorry, I'm curious.
I was in Bay Ridge.
Oh, okay, very nice.
Yeah.
I thought they said New Jersey. My apologies.
I'm glad you asked because I was thinking it as the resident Jersey transplant.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm sorry for what I've done to your state.
I just thought it was interesting because we usually when we gather before we meet the creator, we do like some type of icebreaker question, and I said that like my favorite urban legend is the Jersey Devil, so I thought it was interesting that that's what I thought I was walking into, and it wasn't. So I just kind of thought it was interesting because that's also in the middle of fucking nowhere. So.
Yeah. The Pine Barrens was definitely something that I was thinking a lot about when I was starting to write this devil story. There was a different version of the project that maybe would have considered some of the Jersey Devil stuff a little bit more, but I thought that the political context of the story really should lean into the idea that the devil that is being summoned is an archetype. It's not a specific cryptid that exists in the Pine Barrens that is being brought up by, Mullen and the rest of the agency that's working there. So I wanted it to be a little bit more archetypical, but I do love the Jersey Devil cryptid. I think it's such a cool and interesting piece of like American folklore.
We do an icebreaker question before all of our book clubs on theme to the book that we read, and the question this time was favorite devil story, whether it's from any media, whether it's a movie, a TV show, an urban legend, something like that. So we were curious how you would have answered that if you had been sitting around when we started doing that. If you have up 3 or whatever.
Yeah. This one is a little tough. An older devil story that I love is Blood on Satan's Claw. Fantastic movie from way back in the day. But also I think of a lot of different types of folk horror as, devil stories. For example, the film that popped into my mind, and this is not a capital S Satan story, but to me, Hereditary is a little bit in this vein of a story about a corrupting influence about the devil. Granted, the entity is Paimon, he's a demon, but to me, that's one of the more interesting modern, like, quote unquote, evil cult, demonic, satanic stories that has come out, at least in theater and cinema.
Knowing that there are lots of types of devil and demon stories, how did you decide sort of like which laws of devil lore you wanted to include in Let Me Out?
I think what I mainly aimed to include was the emotional impact of the idea of summoning the devil. So I wasn't necessarily focused on one particular piece of lore or, one particular legend that I really wanted to pull from. I didn't want to give the devil like a fiddle. What I was interested in is the idea of Baphomet as satanic figure, and the inherent gender ambiguity that goes along with a bunch of queer and trans teens summoning the devil, who turns out to be a little bit more, quote unquote, like them than they are like the other people in town. And that sense of connection to gender diversion and gender ambiguity was really important for us to convey in this story, specifically in the design. That was something that George really spearheaded and really wanted to lean into those elements of design. I think I really like how that came out and how that reinforced that.
Did you always know that you didn't want that physical form of the devil to really be visible until really like the climax of the story?
It was we went back and forth on it for a while, to be honest. It was I think like within the story again I wanted to lean into the inherent danger of that. So there's a lot of camp and a lot of fun kind of goofy dialogue that comes along with their presence in the story. But I did want there to be that moment of, is this force actually corrupting for real? Like, is it corrupting the people around them? Is the devil actually going to turn on the kids who were following? I wanted that ambiguity and that sense of kind of tension to come through for as long as possible in the story. And also the idea of the sacrifice, like the blood sacrifice that they end up doing, having to physically comprise the body of the devil itself, I think it's just a cool, fun horror conceit. I'm a big Hellraiser fan, so the idea of blood forming something is just a motif that I really like, and iconography that I really like as well.
Wes, did you want to ask any clarifying questions about?
No, looking back at some, I missed some stuff.
Cool. Sweet.
Yeah, and that explanation helped a lot too. So.
Awesome. Thinking of our like 4 main characters, are they like? Can you speak a little bit about the inspiration to each of them, and sort of maybe if there was a favorite to write, or someone whose voice you heard the loudest while you were writing?
I really don't like to pick favorite children. I think what I was seeking with the 4 that we see in the comic is that sense of group cohesion and that really beautiful sense that you can only get, not only, but tends to be most prominent in your kind of like very early 20s of like friends who you would truly like ride or die for. That sense of dynamic between the 4 was really, really important to me. Jackson is always very funny to write. I had a good time writing him. But I think there was really fun scenes for any of the 4 throughout the process. But yeah, just that sense of, I really wanted to bring in that sense of familiarity and just like deep understanding that can occur within these friend groups, as well as some sense of the conflict that can come when you are so intimately familiar with somebody. So we do get moments of sort of Mitch doing something out of line and they clock it immediately because they know him so well. So yeah, just that the group dynamic was really important to me, and I think is like an important part of a lot of coming of age stories, obviously.
Actually, I do have one
Yes, of
clarifying
course.
question.
Yeah.
So, it seems that the devil or demon can only be summoned through the pentagram, like in a physical aspect. But is he or they, are they kind of always around in a more metaphorical sense in the town? Because when Mitchell is seeing him and no one else can, I was a little confused on why he had to like reconjure him.
Yeah, I think that the devil itself as like a force and as sort of a sentiment, I really did want to imply that they were kind of always present and always there within the context of the town. And the physical element had to basically be created and conjured through some kind of ritual or witchcraft, whether that be, in the end, sort of a verbal consent when shedding blood has happened and they're kind of bouncing to possess the distinct members of the friend group. That sort of initial reconstitution and the strength that's gained through that sacrifice needs to be physical. But yeah, the devil is sort of extant force that is floating around in the town that is present in some kind of intangible way is also there as well.
We were kind of going back and forth with this earlier, but is Garrett actually with the government, or was that a ploy? You can keep it ambiguous if you want, but
I really think that it's up to interpretation. Yeah. I think it's up to interpretation. For me personally, he is, but it almost doesn't matter to me.
That was very bubbly.
You go.
I'm good, sorry.
Okay.
It is an emotional book.
Other questions from folks? Okay.
I have a question, another question about the pentagrams. So we were, is the pentagram just kind of used as a symbol of like ritual needed to, you were just saying that you needed some sort of ritual to create the physical body. Is the pentagram just one example of that symbol, or was there a deeper meaning with the circles? Because the devil character talked a little bit about being trapped in the circles and kind of laughed at it. Anyway, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the type of rituals that you chose to use.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I live in the north of Boston. I'm very close to Salem, Massachusetts. So I'm very tapped into like very revisionist takes on witchcraft and ritual and other types of sort of satanic temple worship and stuff like that. That's all research that I am very interested in, and it's very fun to kind of live in and around in the area. Sorry if you can hear my cat screaming in the background. Something's happening. But I was interested in the idea that Garrett has settled upon this thing that he's very certain is correct and is very certain is a way to bring about this entity. But a different type of certainty might have also worked. I like the idea that there are sort of many ways to get at summoning, at ritual, at different things that could have brought forth this entity. And what drew the devil to New Jersey was the idea of that chaos and disruption. And so, yeah, that's sort of where the idea came from. I think it didn't have to be a pentagram. I think it's a good visual shorthand. But yeah, I do think that it could have been, I think it's the conviction and the willingness to bring forth something that brings it into existence.
Ruining everything.
Gary's a fancy doctor and their pager keeps going nuts.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I got you.
Thank you so much.
You gotta go. Oh.
Yeah, Gary's.
Thanks.
Yeah, you can just.
Yeah.
Emmett, can I ask what you're most proud of from this book?
The fact that it exists at all, to be honest. It was our first full-length graphic novel project, specifically together. We had pitched it traditionally to a variety of publishers before kickstarting it. And the process of organizing that, getting an agent, kickstarting, and then also returning to publishers with the project itself for physical release was all stuff that was driven by the two of us. And was eventually driven by my agent as well. And so I think there were a lot of junctures in which the comic could not have existed, or we could have just decided to give up on completion, basically. And it's given us both a lot of opportunities to continue making more work, both in comics and prose and illustration. So yeah, I'm truly very proud of the fact that it exists in the world at all.
So you ended the novel with a question mark and a little bit open-ended. Do you plan on exploring another town or another follow-up novel to this? Maybe following the same group of teenagers?
Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about it. Currently, we both have other projects in the fire. My day job has gotten a lot more rigorous since then. So things are not currently in the works for that, but this is something that we always talked about, and we wanted this to be a good place to stop this particular story, but truly never say never to more stories with Mitch and the gang.
You mentioned having other work that you're doing and irons in the fire. Are you able to share about any projects that have happened since Let Me Out or that are coming forward? You mentioned a little bit about your prose novel.
Yeah. I'm currently working on a murder mystery farming simulator game called Grave Seasons, in which you farm fish and maybe stop the supernatural murders which are going on in the town around you. So yeah, that's one of the big things that I'm working on currently with my studio Perfect Garbage. And that'll be coming in 2026. Again, my debut prose novel came out around this time last year, actually. And that's a queer nautical horror, sort of about the revenge of the Eldritch Deep, if you're into that kind of thing. And I additionally have a smaller length middle grade graphic novel about the sinking of the Titanic coming out with Penguin Random House from their Who Is series. So that's coming as well. And if you look up George Williams' illustration online, you can see all the stuff that he's up to as well.
That's awesome. Have you been reading any comics or graphic novels lately that you've been enjoying?
Oh my gosh. So right now I have actually been digging back into Hellboy, believe it or not. I read a lot of Hellboy growing up, clearly. And I'm digging back into the Hellboy in Hell, basically, second arc. I have not had as much time to keep up with comics and graphic novels as I want to, again, because of my day job. Playing a lot of video games.
Oh, well, what are you playing?
So I have recently finished playing through Cult of the Lamb, another demonic, lots of hell-themed stuff, another demonic-themed indie game. I also have been playing through a lot of Dredge and Hades 2. A lot of indies, a lot of fun, roguelike style stuff with weird elements going on. Yeah.
Dig it. Yeah, I got a lot of Cult of the Lamb vibes from this too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely that style is adjacent, I think.
Anybody have any last questions?
Personally, I love the set list at the next one. Secluded Illusion of the Gifts from the Melvins. So the sort of punk rock background of this is it just the idea of a definite visualization of all the outcasts in this small time, and also because it fits with the setting of the story, or is it just that you and George are really punk?
It's a little bit of one, a little bit of the other, I think. It's all music I listen to. It's a real playlist that exists in my music library. But yeah, I think I really wanted to tie it in with the ambiance and the energy of the comic as a whole, and also with the band and concert elements within the actual characters and within their sort of the things that they love as well.
Having it in the back room of a bowling alley is actually a really nice, authentic touch. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. I've been in some interesting venues in my time, so yeah, it felt appropriate.
is there anything you would change about the book that's been published? Maybe something that's been edited that you didn't want edited, or anything like that?
So we were extremely lucky in our work with Oni Press because we had really completed and kickstarted the comic itself before they were able to come in and work on the print. So I would say that nothing really got edited out that I wanted to stay in, per se, on the publishing end at least. They've been wonderful to work with. I think that it's they really haven't messed with the content at all in a way that I've been very happy with. If anything, I would have made it longer. I think that there is a lot more room for world building and for character building in the comics. So if anything, I wish I'd had the forethought to put in, more pages, more stuff, a little bit of a longer outro, possibly.
All right, well then follow up. Is there anything you fought with George with?
Genuinely, no. Okay, so
Drama, man. Drama.
I have very similar influences and very similar, I guess, like backgrounds. Obviously, not the same person, but like we have similar interests and we bonded over a lot of the same movies, music, et cetera, et cetera. So we really didn't have too many conflicts. I'm very type A, but George is very easy to work with and like was a wonderful collaborator. So I'm sorry to let you down. There's no good goss. So.
Okay, answer. It's not what I wanted.
Next time.
Emma, you certainly don't have to, but do you have any questions for us?
Ooh, I didn't come prepared with questions. You caught me. You got me unawares. None that I can think of, to be completely honest. I guess, is there any horror comics that you've enjoyed recently? What kind of spooky stuff are you into? I know it's the wrong season for it, but you know.
There's
I mean, not in this book.
Yeah. So yes, we read horror stuff every month, so it's always the right season. Also, we just had our summer ween party, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
More thriller than horror, like Exquisite Corpses has been phenomenal.
I was gonna say, I think a lot of people like the Deviant.
Deviant was really good.
Deviant was excellent.
Yeah, so Deviant from
More
James
mystery, yeah.
Tynan,
Mhm.
James Tynan and Michael Walsh. Yeah.
Night of the Gold was really good.
Night of the Gold from Scott Snyder
Yeah.
and Frank Pavia.
Yeah.
Who's that one that follows the
Oh yeah, Tender from Beth
Tender? Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know if we like that. I just think it's one of our most talked about.
Love that.
Wait.
I like it.
I said, I don't know if we like
For
that
Tender.
version of Tender. I think
Oh,
we
yeah.
It's evocative.
we certainly bring it up enough.
It's the only book I've ever read that almost made me throw up, and I love it so much.
Glowing endorsement here.
I can't. Is that from Fantagraphics?
Yeah.
Yeah, from Fantagraphics. It's so good.
Awesome. The trees.
The
Oh, yes.
Trees.
From Patrick Horvath is so
Sequel
good.
series is coming out soon.
Yeah.
Wasn't in book club, but Black Mass was good. Which I've also heard.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like fantasy horror sort of stuff or like
Everything's
cinema.
fun.
I like the
That is that's more like a thriller, I guess.
Yeah.
Everything is fine, the webtoon turned print. Yeah.
I like Samana too.
so.
I was thinking about, I was like,
Yeah,
this
that
is,
makes sense.
Somna's like
Yeah.
a really sexy devil story.
Yeah, Somna's a real banger. I checked that one out a good while ago, but yeah, very good. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thirst Trap Devil Story.
Yeah, we read that in September we have 3 graphic novel book clubs. We do Sextember, so we do spicy books for all the book clubs, and so we did Somna for our horror club.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
When I arrived at the castle, it's also really good.
Yes, When I Arrived at the Castle is excellent. I enjoy all of their books.
Yeah.
Very
Sweet.
cool. Awesome.
Yeah. Any last questions from anybody for anything? Okay. Emmett, thank you so much for joining us and for your time. We are super excited for all the projects we have coming out. You certainly have a lot of horror fans and video game fans in this room, so I'm sure your name will be a present mind. But thank you so much. No matter how much we enjoy a story, when we come to the table, getting to hear from the author, from the creators, about all the pieces of themselves they put into the book helps us love it that much more. So we really appreciate you and your time.
Of course. Thank you so much for reading and enjoying or not. I appreciate it. And thanks for the good questions.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
This is great.
thank you, Emmett.
Cheers. Of course.